Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. The Indian Jewish Heritage Center, together with the Kuchini Jewish Heritage Center in Nevatim, in collaboration with Vered HaSharon, chapter of Hadasa, Israel, are happy to host today Mrs. Ruth Greenfield, that will show us a glimpse about her father, the late Joshua Benjamin Bhonker. Before we move on to Ruth, I'm happy to invite Mrs. Galia Sprong, the co-president of Vered HaSharon chapter of Hadasa, Israel, to say a few words.
I'm very happy to welcome everyone tonight on behalf of Hadasa Israel and especially our Vered HaSharon chapter. We are, of course, very excited and proud that the speaker tonight is our very own Ruthie Greenfield. And we thank you, Ruthie, for volunteering. And we know that this is going to be a wonderful, we've heard this once already and we're back again, some of us, so we know it's going to be a very fascinating lecture. So thank you, Ruthie, and again, welcome everybody and enjoy the evening.
Okay, thank you, Galia. So for today's talk, we're very happy to host Ruth Greenfield. Ruth was born in New Delhi. I won't say much. Ruth, you will introduce yourself.
Chafetz Chaim, Ohev Yamim Lirot Tov. That was the song we just heard. Who is the man who desires life and loves days to see good in them? Guard your tongue, turn away from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. This is the song my friend Shuli Nathan, who sang the Jerusalem of the Gold song, she sang this song at the 1-month death anniversary of my father. Good evening, friends and Hadasa sisters. I would like to thank you for this opportunity to speak about someone who's close to my heart. I'm honored to see so many listeners who have taken keen interest in this lecture and which has taken months of research. I will take this opportunity to thank my Hadasa chapter in East Brunswick and my Hadasa chapter, the Vered HaSharon chapter here in Israel, my Heritage Center team, my friends and family for all the support. It's because of you, our dreams and the dreams of many here in our country, Israel, are coming true. I'm blessed to have you all in my life. My father, Joshua Moses Benjamin, was born in Lonavla, Maharashtra, India, on the 8th of June, 1919, to Moses and Segula Benjamin, Bhonker. You can see him in this picture on the left, where you have a green arrow. He was born to a large family of 13 children, and he was the 6th child of a large family of 8 boys and 3 girls. 11 children. He often said that all his siblings together could have formed a cricket team. Life as a youngster was not easy, as finances were tight. The brothers would help each other financially with their education. Even when my father got married and moved to Delhi, he would send a large part of his salary to his mother and his siblings for the welfare and education. My mother complained a few times, but my father continued to send this support, and we never felt the lack of money all our life. Some say that even 50% of his salary was sent to his family. After finishing his studies, he married my mother Dinah, daughter of Elisheva and Solomon Garapkar, on March 6, 1949. My mother had just arrived from Karachi. The Jews of Karachi had fled during the partition of India and Pakistan. My grandfather, from my mother's side, was on the merchant navy. Hence, unlike the millions who were raped, killed, and traumatized, the passage to India for my mother's family was less traumatizing. My mother's family settled in Pune and after a few years moved to Israel. My mother was the only one in her family who stayed behind in India. My mother, you can see her here, a beautiful woman, was not only my father's wife, but also his best friend and the most ardent supporter. But my mother also had a life of her own, and she had very high ethics. She was strict, but very kind. She was the co-member of a non-profit organization called the Mobile Crashes. I will speak about it later in my talk. My father always supported and helped her in her goals. Here you see a photograph of my parents at their wedding. My parents practically met under the khuppah, as the earlier meeting was one which was formal in the presence of the elders. It was an arranged marriage, but was made in heaven, as both my parents were very suited to each other. My father and mother moved to Delhi to Pataudi House, which was once the prestigious quarters of the British officers. The young couple had a small room with a private bathroom. That's very rare for times like, when it was 1949. The meals at Pataudi House were served in the officers' canteen by chefs who used to cook for the officers in the British Army. Here you can see a family photograph. I have one sister, Roslyn, who was born in 1950 in Bombay, but the rest of us, my brother Sain, who's on the right, and my brother Solly, who's in the middle, and myself in the left, we all were born in Delhi. We were a close-knit family, and we have remained so since. I was very blessed to have my father and my mother both as strong-willed, kind, intelligent people with very high morals. As they say, behind every strong man is a strong woman, and that was exactly the case with my parents. As you can see, I'm wearing a sari, and this is the sari of my grandmother. Hadasa women, notice the pin, my Hadasa pin on the sari. This is a sari of my grandmother Elisheva. She was also a strong woman and a kind woman. She was the president of Sri Mandal in Lod, Israel. Sri Mandal was an organization to uplift the standards of the women of the area. Here's a photograph of the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. There are few more of my parents. My father and mother were very social people. They had a large circle of friends. Our house, as far as I can remember, was a typical Indian train station with guests coming on a regular basis to visit us. Many of them would come and stay over, and they would not even inform us beforehand. Actually, there was hardly a period when we were just the six of us together. But my father had a large heart, and he would love to invite people over, whether it was friends from work, or it was the Jewish community, or just some passing tourist at the prayer hall. My mother was very accommodating and welcomed the guests with a warm heart. My mother was not only my father's wife, but was also his best friend and companion. My father fully supported her in all the choices she made in her life. Yes, their marriage was made in heaven. My father's famous verse was, "Spiritual growth can only happen if one has common concern has concern towards the welfare of the community. My father was a very spiritual person. He studied at the Sir Eli Kaduri School in Bombay and had excelled in all his subjects. It was at this primary school that he studied Hebrew. The Jewish community in Delhi was very small, but it was a close knit and vibrant community. We had Jews from all the communities of India, the Bnei Israel, the Baghdadis, the Kochinis, and in the late 70s, even the Bnei Menashe. Most of the time, we were just 5 or 6 Jewish families in Delhi. On Shabbat, we hardly got a minyan. However, during the high holidays, we had many Jews who would come from the neighboring towns. And as you can guess, they stayed at our place. There were many tourists or even embassy personnel who would come to the prayer hall. Of course, again, many of them were invited for a simple Friday night dinner by my father. And of course, everything at the spur of the moment. There was no khazan or rabbi at our prayer hall. So for the high holidays, we would invite Mr. Elijah Gadkar from Pune to perform the high holiday prayers. Gadkar uncle, as we called him, taught daddy the prayers so that he could conduct the prayers on his own at the prayer hall. I remember many a time where I was alone with my father in the prayer hall saying all the evening prayers. Those were the most magical moments I had. Mr. Ezekiel Malekar, who's currently running the services of the Delhi synagogue, once said to me, my father was a Sadiq of Sadiqim. He was a honest, good-hearted, compassionate, and loving person. I only saw him get angry a couple of times in my life. Yes, he hardly ever got angry. One of the instances one where he was trying to call my sister who was getting married in Israel, and the operator kept transferring the call to London. I was shocked when he raised his voice. Otherwise, he was always calm and compassionate in his dealings with others. He would always try to find the good in every situation. He was a little bit absent minded, like all of us Benjamins. Many a time he would forget to shut the door, and my mother would get upset and said she would worry that the thieves would come in. And he would say, well, they need the items or the saris or jewelry more than we do. And this was the attitude my father instilled in us from an early age so that we never put emphasis on materialistic things. At home, we were taught to respect everyone who came to visit. Whether it was the peon from the office to deliver papers, or it was the CEOs or the ministers, all of them received a glass of cold water, sometimes jalebis and samosas. Anyone growing up in India would understand when a daughter or son of a top manager comes to give a glass of water by hand to someone. It is showing respect. But this is how we were brought up in our house. Daddy received many prizes and certificates over the years, but never once did he hang the certificates on the walls or boast of his accomplishments. People were attracted to his aura and his charm, and he never introduced himself as chief architect or of India or any other title. He was always Joshua Benjamin. Those twinkling eyes and the warm and compassionate smile attracted everyone. Another interesting side of my father was that all his work was done pro bono. Not all his work, all the work that he did for non-profit organizations or for places of worship. Many times my father would design houses for people and friends. They would come to the house, but he would never demand payment. And many a time they would just say thank you and walk away. And my father would always smile and never ask for the payment. Sometimes we would get upset and we would tell my father that why he didn't ask for the payment. But he would just smile and would say that he enjoyed designing the house for them and moved on to the next subject without making an issue about the payment. My father, as I mentioned, studied the earlier years in Sir Eli Kaduri School. He always excelled in his studies. He loved traveling by train in Bombay and wanted to become a guard on the train like his father. However, one of his friends told him to sign up at the architectural school as he saw that my father was very talented in art. My father signed up and was admitted to the J.J. College of Architecture. This was the year 1946. And in 1951, when my sister was just a baby, he traveled for a few months on a UN fellowship on housing and town planning to Switzerland, United Kingdom, and Sweden. In 1969, he traveled again and went to the Technology College in the UK. My father arrived for the first time for his job interview in Delhi for the position of the junior architect at the Delhi Central Works and Housing Department. On his arrival, he found the train station was full of refugees coming from Pakistan. The train station was jam packed with refugees and their belongings. It took a long time for my father to get out and find his way to the interview. He got the position of the junior architect, but quickly rose to the position of senior architect. He had the title of FRIBA, FIIA, AIIA, which was the Fellow of Royal Institutes of British Architects, Fellow of Indian Institute of Architects, and Associate of Indian Institute of Architects. After retirement from the central government as chief architect, he went on to become the secretary of the Urban Arts Commission that was overlooking the development of the cities. This was a very powerful position, as it gave authority to my father to overlook the development of the cities of India. Hence, he passed many laws that were to do with architecture regarding green areas and avoiding overdevelopment of the cities. He put a lot of emphasis on protecting the environment and making the cities into environmentally friendly cities and not, as he would call it, concrete jungles. My father was also on the jury for paper selections at the University of Delhi and the College of Architecture. Many students who had difficulties in drawing perspectives would come to the house to take private lessons, which were, of course, for free. He was loved by his students and was given the nickname Daddy Cool. If you all remember the song in the 70s, Daddy, Daddy Cool, well, whenever the students would pass my brother or myself on the street or in the schools, they would stop and they say, "You are Joshua Benjamin's daughter or son," and they would start singing, "Daddy, Daddy Cool, Daddy, Daddy Cool." Here are the certificates that were hidden away from our eyes, rolled up in some closet. And I'm really glad I did this talk about my father because I finally get to see the certificates. I have a long list of buildings that my father designed, but we'll start with the feather in his hat, the Parliament Building Annex. An impressive, sprawling, white modern building with a beautiful interior with classy furniture, which was also designed by my father. Even the antique sculptures that were in the lobby were chosen by him. As in all government projects, the building was done on a very tight budget. My father would have to find ways to make his buildings beautiful on a minimum cost. The jalis, that is the Indian screens that you see on the top right photograph, were made on the walls of the building, were made out of concrete slabs in different designs and were put into molds to give the special effects. The Parliament building had to be completed for a conference in 1975, and I have a short story for you all. Everything had to be ready for the conference for the next day. And suddenly my father realized there was no logo on the wall of the main conference room. Let me reiterate that this is the evening before the opening of the conference. My father grabbed some paper, made a design, and created a logo the evening with all of us watching on. It was impossible to find a carpenter to work so late in the night. So he grabbed an old maroon carpet, put the cardboard design on the carpet, and this is what hung on the wall. Yes, if you look on the bottom right picture, you see that logo at the end over there? That is what hung on the wall of the Parliament House conference room in front of all the dignitaries from all over the world. Later, of course, the logo was made from wood and was replaced of a makeshift logo. Unfortunately, the Parliament building does not look like this anymore. They have put an exterior to it, so it doesn't look like this. And this beautiful lobby, which it has the water body and all the plants, is now filled with small rooms. Here's a picture taken with Prime Minister Indira Gandhi at the inauguration of the Parliament building in 1975. She noticed that the architect wasn't in the group, and she insisted on having the architect take a photograph with her. But my father did not want to be in the picture, so everyone had to scramble to go find him, and of course, she made him stand right next to her. Here is another building, which is an impressive, majestic building designed by my father. It is called the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. And I will ask you to look at the building and try and see whether you can see that it was made by an architect. Because if you remember, my father was a modest man. He never put his name on any of the buildings. I'll give you a hint. I will show you the next slide. And here you see the slide of the Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. But look at the ceiling, look at the back wall, and look at the floor. Do you see all the stars of David? Well, that is pointing that the architect was a Jewish architect. Here you see the synagogue, our prayer hall, that is the Delhi Judaheim Hall, and the churches and the headquarters for the distribution center for the non-profit organization of mobile creches, which are all NGOs or places of worship. And as I had mentioned, my father never charged for the designs of these buildings. When he was designing the church, a lot of the people thought that the congregation thought he was Christian. So when he finished designing the church, they invited him to come for services. And and they said, wow, he was very generous. And he very modestly said, well, I'm Jewish. They were shocked. Here is a painting done by Professor Bhonker of the prayer hall in Delhi. Professor J. Bhonker had traveled to India on a regular basis to study Indian synagogues for decades. Marian and Abe Sofer helped Professor Bhonker bring out his book on the synagogues of India and presented our Heritage Center in Nevatim copies of all the beautiful watercolors of the synagogues of India done by Professor Bhonker. Our Indian Jewish Heritage Center in Nevatim has had a few exhibitions with these watercolors in different venues, including the Bar Ilan University and the Embassy of India. Many times, my father would take us to the construction sites of his buildings. Climbing over the bamboo scaffolding and checking out the blueprints was a regular experience for us. But there was one place my father never took us, and it was this building. This was the defense headquarters in Delhi. It was the only time he didn't bring his drawings home, and we never got to see what the inside of the building looked like. All we have is this old picture of my father standing on the steps of the building. Here, they are the courthouses that my father designed. On the left is one of the first courthouses in 1955. You can see that the photograph of the courthouse, you can see that a lot of these courthouses or a lot of the buildings did not have the typical glass which you see in a lot of buildings. But there's a reason for it. My father did not want to use glass because he found that it wasn't the right material for the Delhi's stifling heat and weather conditions. Glass exteriors on buildings require round-the-clock air conditioning. Delhi, if all of you know, has constant power shortages. Hence, these kind of buildings could become like hot furnaces. So my father's designs were tastefully made, and so that they were energy efficient as well as they would suit the environment. My father designed some university buildings. He designed the IIT, the Indian Institute of Technology, in Kanpur, sorry, not Kanpur, but Kharagpur and Bombay. The IIT colleges rated some of the highest colleges in India. One can visit these universities and see how large these projects could be. Here are photographs, which I also discovered recently, of army bases that were also designed by my father. There's so much that I feel I don't know about my father, and I have to start doing more research about what he did. You will ask what my father loved designing the most. And what he had closest to his heart was to design high density buildings for slum dwellers. Despite India's achievement in different fields over the last decades, India has yet to tackle one of its basic needs, that is, housing for its teeming millions. My father voiced his opinions about the crisis in the housing for the deprived and the underprivileged. He would write to ministers and newspapers and would find solutions to help and assist the downtrodden. I have so many papers and folders full of the letters and newspaper cuttings of his correspondence to try and help people who did not have a voice of their own in society. My father was constantly trying to find ways to build houses to raise the standard of living. It was a constant struggle to build affordable housing for the India's urban poor. I will talk about his awards later, but at this point I would like to mention that the money that he won from the prizes and awards, he always used it to buy land or to pay for the housing of the slum dwellers. He never used it to get anything for us. I'm not complaining. We all have it good, and we all, thank God, well taken care of. Here you see a sketch done by my father of the high density building for the slum dwellers. And here you can see an article in the newspaper because his persistence helped. He was successful. My father put a lot of emphasis on the environment when he was designing buildings. Way back then, when not many people spoke about saving trees and making structures environmentally friendly, my father was voicing his opinion about it. In most of his structures, you will see the importance of trees and greenery. He was worried that the world was leading to what he was calling a concrete jungle. Once my father retired, he built a small, modest, but beautiful house in Delhi. Finances were tight, and he was able to build a stylish house which was always open to guests and very welcoming. My father had very high ethics, and a close associate of my father told me that if he had taken any bribes through his years that he was working as chief architect or in the Urban Arts Commission, if he had taken any bribes at all of us, including my grandchildren, would have had penthouses not only in Delhi, but in the center of Tel Aviv. But he was a man of strong principles. So he never, ever took bribes. My sister Rosalind, my brother Sion, and myself made Aliyah, but my brother Solomon stayed behind in Delhi. At some point, he decided to move to Bangalore. And my father, who had retired, decided to move closer to him in the south. He had retired, but a true architect never retires. And my father continued his efforts to raise the standards of the slum dwellers and to get the government to pay attention to their plight. He continued to design buildings. After the 9/11 catastrophe, he designed a spiritual center for people of all religions to gather and promote peace and nonviolence. He sent the design actually to the States, and it was one of the designs that was given by a number of architects for the design that was to be put in Ground Zero. You can see the design here that he has done looks from different angles, looks like a Hindu temple, and it might also look like a Gurudwara. But I'm sure all of you are asking, where's the Jewish side of this building? So all these columns that are going up to the center is actually what forms a Star of David. So on the inside, it was a Star of David. As I promised, This is the list of my father's buildings that he designed. My mother made this list after my father passed away and realized that none of us had kept track of what buildings my father had designed. So I apologize for this partial list. From time to time, we are finding more buildings and we are adding it to the list. It is an impressive list, and I have not even included the private houses that he had designed for people and friends. Here there are more buildings and some more buildings and some more buildings and some more buildings. But here I will pause, and because these are the buildings that were designed overseas. This is the India House in Paris, France. It was built in 1965. He had traveled to a lot of countries, to Kabul, to Pakistan. He traveled to Zambia, to Singapore. So we kind of try to make the list as per the places he traveled to. The embassy of India, Kabul, and Afghanistan was unfortunately bombed during the war by the Russians and was destroyed. But if we have more lists, I will be adding it and it will be put in hopefully at the museum in Nevatim. Now I will speak about the butterfly effect of my father. I will try and cover as much as I can in this short frame of time. My father was very interested in the heritage of the Indian Jews. He had in his possession this map that you see on the top right. It was a map of Goa showing the mansion and it's the Jew street and the medicinal garden of Garcia de Horta. Garcia de Horta was a physician from Portugal in the 16th century who settled in Goa. Goa had a large Jewish population. It was after his death that he was found that he was a Jew. Because this map was in my father's possession, they made a medicinal garden in Goa in Horta de Garcia's mansion. And a similar garden is made now also in Lisbon, Portugal. One of the botanical gardens in the Heritage Center in Nevatim will be named after Garcia de Horta. And we will try to have another Zoom lecture to cover this interesting history of the Jews of Goa. My father was also instrumental in the initial research about the refugees who came to Jamnagar, who were fleeing from Poland during the Second World War. This information is in folders and letters. My father sent this information to Yad Vashem and then contacted the historian Ken Robbins. And we had a lecture at our Heritage Center and a dinner for the professors and teachers later on who are now studying this subject. It is because of this lecture we found 2 survivors of this camp who had fled from Poland and had taken refuge in India. And it's very sad that my father never got to meet any of these refugees. He would have loved to meet them. But I'm glad that at least my mother got to meet these refugees who came to our lecture on the Jamnagar Jews. There was another story which is not so well known. My father took a trip to Manipur to design a building. And at the airport, he heard that there were Jews in Manipur. So he asked the helicopter pilot, he paid him for the gas and the petrol and asked him to take him to the place where the Jews were. And this is the group which is called the Bnei Menashe. He spoke to them and he started to talk to people who came to our synagogue. And it was later that Rabbi Avichail and the historian Hillel Hankin did further research. And now you hear about the Bnei Menashe community who are making aliyah and settling down in Israel. My father was very interested in the Jewish heritage and was constantly doing research in the field. And in addition to his work in architecture, he shared this knowledge of the heritage of Indian Jews, which led to the continued work and research by many other people. My father planted the seed of the rich heritage of many of this, sorry, planted the seed of the rich heritage many years back, and now we are reaping the benefits from people who spoke about the heritage, like Dr. Shalva Weil, Dr. Joan Rowland, Mrs. Shirley Eisenberg, who have written books on this subject. As I mentioned earlier, my father was always trying to find a way to improve the conditions of the underprivileged. He bought land for the children of the servants of my sister in law. He never bought a land for us, but I'm not complaining. As I said, thank God we are managing well. But he did buy land for the children of the servants, and which actually the month after he passed away, they received the land, which was very touching. Whenever my father asked for land for any of the buildings, he got it immediately. You must know how difficult it is to get land, and also good pieces of land, like in the center of a city. He requested land for the prayer hall, and he got the most central land in Delhi, right next to golf links and the embassies. He asked for land for the cemetery and received the land right next to the prayer hall. He requested for land for the extension of the prayer hall and received it again immediately. The non-profit organization where my mother worked was called Mobile Creches, and they rented an office. They rented it till my father requested for land. And I'm sure you know that my father designed the building for them. And where was this land? Right in the center of Connaught Place, which is the center of Delhi. And by the way, the non-profit organizations that was mentioned above was started, that is, mobile creches, was started by Meera Mahadevan, an Indian Jew, in 1969. But many don't know that it was my father who guided her to start the organization. Shirley Eisenberg's husband worked in Oxfam and got funding for food for the organization to feed the children of the laborers. My mother later started volunteering there and became very active and was a core group of the mobile creches. It was a voluntary position. It was the first place that I started to work as a volunteer. Now Mobile Creche has a few offices in Delhi and Bombay and even Pune, and is helping thousands of families of migrant workers. I found this photograph on the internet of the mobile creches. And here you can see on the left is the photograph of the building that my father designed for them. In the center, you see Meera Mahadevan, the Indian Jewish woman who started the organization. And on the right, you see my mother with her friends who were the core group of the nonprofit organization. My father had a keen interest in his heritage of the Indian Jews. In the early 80s, he got me involved to make a documentary film about the heritage of the Bnei Israel Indian Jews. However, when we went for a trip to Navgaon, he saw that the oldest cemetery now in Navgaon was exposed and had no wall, and there was no sign showing it was a Jewish cemetery. He started to raise funds, which was very hard to get. However, he put a lot of money of his own and went to Navgaon and built a monument showing the history of the Bnei Israel. The monument is in the shape of a star, as you can see. The Star of David, and the history of the Indian Jews is carved on the slabs of stones that are on the sides. He also paid to build a wall around the cemetery, but the funds got used up and only the partial wall was built. My mother gave an additional $1,000 to complete the wall, and the amount is still in a bank account. And I hope that one day the community in Bombay will use it to complete the wall around this important heritage site of ours. By the way, it was at the Navgaon cemetery that my father noticed that there was a factory coming up in the distance right on the shore. He realized the damage that factory could cause to the sea, as per the pollution and the air pollution, the water pollution. So he passed a law so as to not allow any factories to be built next to the seafront. Here is a picture of our heritage center in Navatim. This was my parents' dream, and it is coming true. Thank you to all of you. All of you. As you can see, there's a large area allotted for the gardens, and just outside Navatim, there's a lot of space for planting forests. One of these gardens, as I mentioned, will be called the Garza de Horta Garden. We are reaching out to the community to make this happen. And now more than ever, we need to plant more trees and protect our environment and preserve our heritage. It was a dream of my father and my mother that our heritage be preserved. And this led my mother to push me to start the Indian Jewish Heritage Center. We had a core group of members from the Bnei Israel, Kochini, Baghdadi, and Bnei Menashe community on her insistence. She was the one who sat down with Robin Samuel, our first chairman, to draw out the protocol of our non-profit organization. And happy to see the progress with the organization as we have already started with the building of the auditorium as part of the Heritage Center complex. I only wish my parents were here to see this wonderful miracle. As I mentioned, my father used to travel to a lot of places, and wherever he heard about the Indian Jews, he would write down the information, and that is how he started to write the book on the lost tribes. He also wrote a book about the history of the Kochini Jews back in the mid 70s because he wanted to preserve the history of our people. He would always present these books to people, and if someone offered money for the books, he would gently tell the person to donate the money to a worthy cause of their wishes. We have some of the books with us, and we take the money and put it towards the project in Nevatim. Another interesting book he wrote was on garlic. My father was into natural medicines, and he was constantly reminding us to eat papaya because it was good for digestion and ginger because it was good for the throat. But when it came to garlic, that was the medicine of all ailments. Unfortunately, I don't have a copy of this book. Here is a sketch drawn by my father, which is in one of the books. And here is an article in a newspaper about the books that he wrote. My father received many prizes and certificates, but as I mentioned, it was always hidden from our eyes, rolled up and stored in the corner of some cupboard. This is the first time when I'm reading about and seeing all these certificates and prizes. They were brought to Israel by my mother, and I'm so glad I'm doing this talk so I could see and read more about them. My father was to receive the Padma Shri, but there was some underhanded business that happened between the departments, and instead of him getting the award for the design of the Parliament building, an engineer who had not even worked on the Parliament building got the award, and the award money was given to another person. My father tried to get a lawyer to deal with this, but in the end, it was very expensive and he dropped the case. However, my father kept receiving awards. He got the award for the Architect of the Century from the Central Public Works Department. And as he was in Bangalore, Shulamit Malekar, Ezekiel Marekar's daughter, received it for him in Delhi. He got the Chairman's Award for Best Architect in India, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal. He also won the first prize for the design of the Calcutta Museum. Unfortunately, the museum was not built as they had lack of funds. He also won the first prize for the Gandhi Bhavan competition. However, the government entrusted it to a local artist and architect against the rules. Here's a painting of my father that hangs in my room. He had a lot of paintings, but most of them were done on scraps of paper or even on tissue paper. Many a time I would find drawings on notebooks or the edge of a newspaper, any paper my father could lay his hands on when he got an idea to design. I was once taking an exam, and when I turned the page of my notebook, I found a full sketch of my father of his building. Try explaining to the teacher that it was not me scribbling in my book. Questions we regret to ask our parents. I request all of you speak to your parents and ask them now when they are alive, because I regret not asking a lot of questions. In 1993, Shimon Peres, who was the then foreign minister, visited Delhi. My father set up the meeting at our prayer hall. And what was supposed to be a 5-minute visit turned out to be a half an hour visit, where Shimon Peres wanted to sit and taste the food made by the local women, and he wanted to sit with my father and Ezekiel Malekar. He asked for a private meeting with my father. I never got a chance to ask what Shimon Peres discussed in that private meeting he had with my father on the 18th of May, 1993. Also, Moshe Dayan made a secret visit to Delhi in 1977. We know that he met my mother, my sister, and my brother Sion. Sorry, I'll repeat that. My mother, my sister Roslyn, and my brother met Ruth Dayan at that time. But whether Moshe Dayan met my father, we will never know. After a full active life, my father in June 2005 had a stroke. I went to India to visit him. He was paralyzed on the right side of his body, but that did not stop his activities. He had a stenographer who would take notes and type them out for him. He would send these letters to the local government and the ministers demanding changes for the underprivileged. I'll never forget the last words that he told me when I had to leave to go back to Israel. He said, "There is so much to do that I have not yet accomplished. There is so much poverty and corruption. The poor and the needy require housing and assistance, and no one is there to support them. I did not do enough to uplift the lives of the underprivileged in our country." I will now play a short clip of Narendra Modi, what he mentioned in his speech when he was here in Israel.
Friends,
Hear it?
the link between our people goes back to thousands of years when the first Jews landed on India's southwestern coastline. Since then, the Jews have flourished and their traditions and practices thrived in India. We are proud of Jewish sons and daughters of India like Lieutenant General J.F.R. Jacob, Vice Admiral Benjamin Simpson, Master Architect Joshua Benjamin, and film actors Nadira, Sulochana, Pramila.
Thank you.
Great, Ruth. That was amazing. First of all, you can stop share. And there's a question about the Nevatim Museum and the contact of the garden. If you can give us some information about that.
The gardens in Nevatim. We have a project which, if you had seen the beginning of the show, of our speech, we have collaborated with the Nevatim Museum, which is in the south of Israel. Our organization has the Bnei Israel, the Baghdadis, the Kochinis, and the Bnei Menashe in our group. And the project in Nevatim is to preserve the heritage of the Indian Jews and also give the ambience of India, because India has so much to offer. And the architects have given, I can send anyone who would like the information, we can send you this information and the drawing. They are large circles between the different buildings which will have the gardens. And these gardens, there will be a garden for meditation and yoga. There will be a garden for medicinal herbs. There will be a botanical garden. There will be a garden for sculptures, because we got a lot of people who are sculptors in our community. So this project is a large project We just received funding for the auditorium, which we have started now. The architects have given in the design, and that is a first step. It's a lifelong project, and I'm sure we'll move on for many years to come. But it's a lovely project. It's going to bring in education to the area, it'll bring in culture, it'll bring in jobs. The south of Israel, we do not have, enough places to give jobs to people. So a project like this will bring in a lot of jobs. It will be a center for India, Israel, for the trade, for we would love to have more information on Ayurveda and yoga. So the list goes on and on and on. So, but of course, it'll only happen if we have the support, because whenever we get support for one of the projects, we start straight away. Just like the auditorium, we got funding and we starting. And this auditorium will be used for by people all over Israel for functions. It'll be used by people coming, traveling to, let's say if you have people traveling to Elat, you can come and see functions, and of course tourists who can come and see movies and documentary movies, conferences, conventions, goes on and on. So it's a lovely project. I'm very proud and I'm so happy to be part of it, because this is exactly what my parents would have wanted. Non-profit, where you do something for the community, helping the community. By the way, to my Hadasa ladies, my sisters, I used to volunteer a lot in Hadasa, till my mother said, Ruthie, it's time you also help the Indian Jews. So that is how we started with IJHC, that's the Indian Jewish Heritage Center. But of course, I still love to go to my Hadasa lectures because I love my Hadasa sisters. So if there are any questions,
Great.
please ask and we'll give you more
Yeah,
details.
Ruth, there's Galia and David are asking, did your father ever come to Israel?
Yeah,
And you have another question.
he came to Israel a few times. Unfortunately, none of the buildings here were designed by him. He did give designs to different people because we had wanted to have the museum once in Netanya, and he just sat there and drew out the diagram and the whole sketch of the museum. But yes, he's been here a few times.
Okay. You have another question. How are you going to make a botanical garden in a desert like Israel?
Oh, well, first of all, Israel, we are the country for recycling water. And of course, you must have heard about drip irrigation, where you use small amounts of water. But there's something very special in Nevatim, which is it's mind-boggling. There is just on at the border of Nevatim, there's a large water reservoir which has got wastewater. Yes, wastewater that is from the neighboring towns of Beersheba. That water is recycled, and that is the water that is used in Nevatim to water all the plants. It's called gray water. So this is the water which we will be also using. So there's no lack of water. And this reservoir, by the way, I thank JNF as well as Keren Kayemet of Israel, because they were the ones who, paid and funded this big project. But as I said, no lack of water. We can have a forest, we can have the garden, whatever you want. All we need is now the support and funding.
Great.
I hope that answered
you have
the
a lot
question.
of compliments. You got a lot of compliments in the chat. So I won't read all the compliments, but I'll send them all to you so you can see them. If there's any more questions, this is the time, guys.
Excuse me, can I say a few words about Uncle Joshua?
Oh, Abraham, how are you?
Yeah, hi, Ruthie. Ruthie, this is
wonderful to see you.
Gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, this is Abraham from Canada. Okay, that's it.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so I have known Uncle Joshua from 1972 till the time he passed away in 2005. There are very few people, who I have admired in my long life. And Uncle Joshua was one of them whom I've always admired. He was as it has been said, he was kind, he was humble and modest in spite of the fact that he was one of the topmost government officers. He was an intellectual. He was technically oriented, so we had very good, engaging conversations. He was research minded, as Ruti said. He also made a book on the lost tribes, and he presented this book to me too. And he always smiled, and that humor I can never forget.
Yeah.
I I was introduced to the family when I was just 17 years old. I was in Bombay, and I got admission to the IIT Delhi. And my grandfather and my parents and my grandparents were nervous. They said, this guy of 17 years just going out of the house for the first time. So they got introduced to the Benjamin family. And I have, of course, had to stay in the hostel. It was mandatory. But as Ruti said, their house was a train station, and the large heart that they had, I was welcomed by uncle as and Auntie Dinah as a part of their family. And for the next 5 years, for all the Yom Tovs, for all the festivals, for the card, for the New Year, I was always in their house spending the days with them. I will never forget that. After I left Delhi and I went to Bombay to work, uncle used to visit Bombay for some professional work and some some cases, whatever, I don't know. And he used to live in Centaur Hotel, which was close to my house. But every occasion, he never missed to visit us. And we used to have a nice chat, and we always kept in touch. In fact, when he retired, I visited him in Jangpur. I used to live in Jangpur. I visited him just to see how, because he was alone with his wife, and his children had gone to Israel. His youngest son was in Bangalore. So I spent a week or 10 days with him there, and we always kept in touch. And I will never forget, Zikron li Baraka to him, and may his memory be blessed.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh.
It's lovely to see you, Ruthie. So
Wow.
I would say that
Kalpana.
I have known Ruthie since possibly about when we were 8 or 10 years old. And I just want to say that I feel really privileged and humbled to have known your parents. I have very, very fond memories of your parents. I've shared many Sabbath evenings with you on Friday.
Wow,
I've been to the Jewish synagogue singing Hava Nagila. As somebody who is not Jewish, I always felt really welcome in your house, and your parents showed me a lot of warmth. I think what I remember most about your parents was the fact that they really engaged with the community, and they were so active in the Jewish synagogue. And your mom's work in the mobile creche. I think your father was a very, very simple, down-to-earth man, and very few really knew that he was one of the best architects of his time. I also remember entering your house and you touching the mezuzah on the side and saying your prayers.
Yeah.
And all I'm going to end by saying is that I think parents live through their children, and they'll certainly you as a credit to them and your brothers and sisters.
Oh,
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, wow.
Okay, great. Guys, if there's anyone else, this is the time. Please. Yes, Flori,
I would like
please.
to say something to Ruthie. Reveal to her that I have very good memories of your parents back from 1965. My newlywed sister had gone with her husband to Delhi as he was transferred there, and I went there for a vacation, and we came to know the Jewish community there. And your mother was the greatest host, I should say, that she entertained me with my sister. She took us along for shopping. And when my father came, they invited us to your house for dinner. And along with your mother, that was the first time that I learned to I knew what was paper dosa. She took us,
Oh.
took us to a South Indian restaurant, and she ordered paper dosa, and that was a delicious dish. And that was, since then, I love paper dosa. So she was a wonderful lady and very kind, very beautiful, and very, very friendly. We had a wonderful time with her, and she saw to it that we enjoyed ourselves in Delhi. So I remember them with fondest of memories, and may their souls rest in peace.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ruth, last words are yours. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you so much. I'm so touched. I'm so touched. Wow. You all, it is because of you all that, our dreams are coming true and my parents' dreams are coming true. So, thank you. Thank you. I would say to Avner and Liz and Kalpana and also the people who've been helped to get, spread the word. My Hadasa team, Galia and Ronnie and Helene and Kenny and Thalia. And I hope I haven't forgotten anyone because this list will go on and on. Amanda and Alvin and Robin. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Really, all of you, I welcome you. Let's get this project to be a success and make our people proud and our children and grandchildren proud. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thank you.